That is John Smith. This is DawgsCentral Live on a Monday afternoon. Hope all of you guys are doing well. Hope it's a good start to the work week. We are here to talk a little UGA as always. NFL draft was this weekend. That's kind of the latest big news in the not just college football world, but total football world. John, any initial takeaways from this weekend's NFL draft?
Graham, I posted on Twitter that I'm no longer a Falcons fan. I have entered the transfer portal.
I saw that.
No, I don't. I was kind of joking.
My mom read your Heinz Ward tweet out loud in our living room last night.
I mean, so listen, the Falcons. Listen, this is not a Falcon show, so we won't go down the Falcons road. I don't hate the picks that the Falcons made, for the record. But the Falcons just, the evaluation is really interesting. So for me, I'll tell you at a high level, when it comes to the draft, I mean, you can grade value, but talk to me in 2 years and we'll tell you how good the draft picks were. I mean, these guys haven't played an NFL down, and there have been plenty of examples of guys who, everyone thought were going to be Vic Beasley. I'll keep on the Falcons thread, but there have been plenty of scenarios where everybody thought, somebody was going to be the next big thing, and then you have guys like Aaron Rodgers who were picked late in the draft and going to end up being a Hall of Fame quarterback. So I think overall this draft class, it was interesting because I do think the draft class ended up being stronger across the board for Georgia than maybe folks gave it credit for. Georgia had 10 players drafted, which was the most, along with Alabama. That's 25 draft picks in the last two, which sets a modern day draft record for two drafts. And when you look at where guys were taken, 3 first-round draft picks is it's pretty good. So I think Georgia is in a really good position going forward. So like to see it.
Yeah, for sure. I think that you're definitely right about that. Thought it was interesting just to see. I mean, obviously the whole Philadelphia Eagles thing was exciting, I think, for a lot of people, and for a guy like Jalen Carter after the last 3 or 4 months for him, I think you definitely get some good support there.
Yeah.
And I think that's encouraging. But really, I think what I walked away from the draft was just the NFL sees a tremendous value in drafting Georgia players, and they see a value that they do not see in 99.9% of other college football programs. Like, there is a lot of emphasis being put on the Georgia guys, and I think perhaps we talk a lot about development. I mean, one of the first pieces of media that I ever did that got any attention was a phone call to a radio station in the upstate of South Carolina after the radio host spent like a week straight of doing Kirby Can't Develop takes in the 2021 spring. Like, that was a narrative at one point in time. This time 2 years ago, there was a conversation being had about why isn't Kirby Smart turning all this talent into NFL draft picks, into SEC championships, into national championships, into individual accolades and awards and All-American teams. And all of that has happened a lot over the last 2 years. So it's interesting. And I think just as a Georgia fan observer, you are in this period right now where you've won back-to-back national titles, and it can be hard to remember that, like, it wasn't always this way, that, you haven't been sitting on top the entire time, or that there was questions, and that, Kirby Smart as a hire was not really well received by the media when it happened. And so you look at what's happened, and I think, like, for Georgia, the value that you're getting as a high school player is really unmatched in college football right now. Like
Mhm.
their hit rate on turning 5 stars into draft selections is higher than the national average of 57%.
It's 80%.
Yeah, if Georgia
yeah.
if you're a 3-star and Georgia is chasing after you hard and you have a committable offer from them, then you're probably not a 3-star. You know, like
Right.
the industry has probably screwed something up.
Yeah.
And so in a way that I think very few programs, if any, have ever been in the modern recruiting era, Georgia's kind of like an evaluation bellwether. And I think
Mhm.
that is the big takeaway for me. It's not just that, you know, Georgia's recruiting 5 stars and those guys are getting drafted, because in and of itself, that's really not that big of a surprise. It is, I think, very fascinating just when you go back and look at all the recruits that Georgia could have been in on at a certain time in a certain class and where they focus their attention, and just how right they almost always are in terms of who they want to bring in is kind of fascinating, honestly. Like there's nobody doing a better evaluation job on defense in college football. And I would say, you know, if not for some maybe kind of, you know, questionable quarterback evals earlier in the Kirby Smart era, I think you would say that across the board. That would be the only one position that you might, you know, say, I don't know, there's things you could go back and second guess in terms of who they targeted from a recruiting standpoint, but they also just got a guy who nobody wanted to give a scholarship to and turned him into a 4th round NFL draft pick. So it's pretty fascinating what they're doing. It's pretty like incredible. And we haven't really seen anything quite like it before.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're spot on. And I think what's been interesting about Georgia with the way they've recruited and trained these draft picks is one of the things, you know, is Kirby Smart has convinced guys to stay, right? I mean, the 2021 class, 2020 class, I guess, had a bunch of guys who could have gone out for the draft that ended up staying. And then you had, you know, last year you had a few guys who could have gone to the draft and ended up staying. And this year you've had a few guys who could have gone to the draft and ended up staying. And what's interesting with Georgia is, you know, with this development, I was reading, I think it was Jake Rowe who tweeted that Georgia, that the only scholarship player that will be out of eligibility at the end of 2023 will be Tramel Walther. And so you got like, it's crazy. So not only have you developed all these guys who have now been drafted and you set NFL draft records, but now you're in a place where you've got a team with a lot of eligibility left. So a lot of guys will go to the draft after this season, but you're going to have a lot of those guys that, you know, I think Kirby will convince to come back for another year and get developed more, improve their draft stock. Right. And that's the one thing that I think has been interesting is that Kirby Smart has not only built a program where he develops and where he, you know, puts a big emphasis on team and connection and all those things, but he's convincing a lot of these guys to actually stick around, the ones that, you know, are good players that maybe need, you know, another year under their belt before they're ready to really maximize on their draft stock. So I think that's what you're also seeing. I think that's why you see, you know, 8 players taken in the first round the last 2 years. And you see some of these guys, you know, really not only getting drafted, but getting drafted in places where it can really pay off for them in the long term. Even Stetson Bennett is a great example where that guy was a 4th round draft pick. Like, I mean, you know, there were people who said that Stetson Bennett would not even get drafted, and not only did he get drafted, but he got drafted in the 4th round, which comes with a $4.5 million contract, which is right. I mean, it's not first.
The dude that everybody made Kia jokes about.
Everybody
signed a $4.5 million contract.
Yes, everybody made jokes about this man selling insurance, and he just signed a $4.5 million contract with I think it's an $800,000 signing bonus. So, you know, at the end of the day, I think that development, you know, those types of examples, not only development, but development that actually turns into real money in the draft has been really, really great to see.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I think Robert Beal's another really excellent example of this. Like, signed in the class of 2017, over 4 years as a Georgia Bulldog, from 2017 through 2020. The guy played less than 200 total snaps. That includes special team reps.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a lot of football. Did not play much football at all. It was in the portal in 2019, right? Like, looked around. I don't know if there wasn't, offers that he was interested in or what, but for whatever reason, he came back, and he's a guy that was a top 100 overall player in the country, top 10 player in the state of Georgia, top 10 edge in the entire class of 2017. And he waited for 4 years. And then in 2021, he starts to see some snaps. And then all of a sudden, probably the best defense in, modern college football history. He's the guy that ends up leading it in sacks with 6.5. And he still was kind of he was Nolan Smith's backup at Jack last year. But I remember going back to spring practice of 2022, and Chidera Uzo-Diribe had just been hired as the edge coach, and people saying like, yeah, he talks about, Nolan Smith and Robert Beal are kind of like, they're basically coaches on the field, and they make his life so much easier because they know things about the defense that he hasn't even fully grasped yet in terms of just coming on board and certain ways that Georgia wants these guys to play things. So, I mean, he brought a tremendous value to Georgia by sticking around and by, drilling the same defense for 6 years. But in the end of all that, you're talking about a guy who basically didn't play any football for his first 4 years of college, and he ends up getting drafted. Like, that's kind of incredible.
Not only that, but he's playing with – so his competition is Cleveland Farrell and Austin Bryant, who each signed a 1-year deal with the 49ers. He signed a 4-year, $4 million contract. And what I loved about Beal, about his story, I think a lot of people missed it, is that John Lynch, who's the general manager of the 49ers, said that Kirby Smart, so what he said, they, all these GMs get up and talk about their draft picks. He got up and talked about Robert Beal, and he said Beal's a really, really gifted athlete. And he said, you rely a lot on relationships in this thing, and Kirby Smart's been good to us. He said he's got a lot of players. Kirby said, Kirby told us someone's going to get a really gifted and talented player if they just let Robert Beal go hunt quarterbacks and set edges. And when he said that, that's exactly what we do here in San Francisco. And so that's what John Lynch said about Robert Beal, right? And so you hear that, right? It's like Kirby Smart, that's what happened. Robert Beal comes in, he, doesn't see the field a lot, and then he gets later in his career, and Kirby Smart says, oh, well, we're just going to let this guy go hunt the quarterback and set edges. Like, we're not going to ask him to do anything complex. We're just going to let the guy just go play ball and be an athlete. And now again, that's paid off. And Robert Beal, 9.5 sacks over the last 2 seasons at Georgia. And so, I think he's in a really good spot, not only with the contract that he landed, the organization he landed with, but also the approach, right? With John Lynch just saying, yeah, we're just going to let him set the edge and hunt the quarterback. And
we know he knows how to do that.
Yeah, and that's what I love about development, right? When you see that kind of thing with Georgia, is that these players, some of them come in and it takes a little while to figure out, well, what kind of player are they actually going to be? They're competing with some very gifted guys, and the biggest piece of Kirby's development, I think, as a head coach over the last, probably 4 years specifically, has been he's gotten so good at understanding his personnel and being able to rotate guys in and just let guys do what they do best, right? And not be in a situation where you're trying to force a player to do things that they're just not necessarily gifted at. And part of that is recruiting. Like, he has enough depth at Georgia where he can rotate that front seven and just let guys do what they do best. And but I also think, for me, I think the Georgia coaches always have the next level in mind. They understand what that means for the program. They understand what that means for recruiting. They understand what that means for these players. And so I think that's a big part of the maturation of Kirby Smart as a head coach, is he's just been able to, take a step back and be like, all right, yeah, I'm not gonna force these guys to play, in positions that maybe they're not ready to play in. I'm not going to force these guys to do those types of things. And so I think that's been really a really great development for him as a head coach.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Robert Beal not talked a lot about in the lead up to this NFL draft, and maybe even not really talked about that much. Thank you, Craig.
It's Bobby Beal. Craig wants
Bobby
everyone
Beal.
to know.
Bobby Beefy Beal. In the lead up, I mean, like even during the season last year, I think just a steady guy that maybe was underappreciated. But you go back and look, like after him and Nolan Smith performed at the combine, I was curious, like how many edge guys, true edge players, have run a sub 4.55 in the last since 2015. At the NFL Combine, there's only been 20 edge guys to go sub 4.55, and two of them are Robert Beal and Nolan Smith. So, like, to your point, you're talking about a really good athlete. He is that. There's no question there. And Nolan Smith had the highest run defense grade in a season by any edge player who has ever gone under 4.55.
I mean, Robert Beal running 4.55 at 6'4", 250. I mean,
4.48 went 4.48.
Yeah, just wild,
crazy.
Just wild.
Yeah. Any other thoughts from the draft, or that situations that stood out to you that anybody you thought landed in a good spot where they're going to make an impact early? Or
I mean, I think Broderick Jones, I think, is obviously in a good spot. I think the Steelers are a fantastic organization. I think Broderick Jones is going to play early and often. I am interested to see, Nolan Smith in a first-round draft pick. I think I think it's well deserved. I'm interested to see what he does in that Eagles defense and what impact he can make early on. But yeah, I think from the overall NFL draft, I mean, you may have some takeaways and some thoughts. For me, I'm just always hesitant, and I think it's because I'm a Falcons fan. I'm just always hesitant to be like, oh, this guy is going to be good, or this is a good value, But I will say, I think the Panthers made a great pick with Bryce Young. I think the Texans made a great pick with C.J. Stroud. I think there was all that speculation around test scores and all those things, and I think at the end of the day, it was nice to see between C.J. Stroud, between the Eagles taking Jalen Carter with the 9th pick. I think a lot of these kind of narratives coming into the draft, it was nice to see some organizations with conviction. They were just like, we see the tape, right? The Texans taking C.J. Stroud and then trading up to number 3 to get Will Anderson. It's like, come on, that's I think at the end of the day, it was nice to see folks, GMs and front offices have conviction around some of the players and not let what we saw last year. I think where you had like Nakobe Dean falling because of medical concerns or whatever. You saw a lot of those things that were happening. You saw that a little bit with Darnell Washington and Keely Ringo this year, right? Where it was, people were saying, well, Darnell Washington is foot situation or whatever. It was nice to see a few organizations that are like, yeah, bump those narratives, man. Like, we're going to have conviction and we're going to go out and get guys and that we think can help our organization. The one obvious head scratcher is Anthony Richardson. I mean, the 4th pick overall of the draft. I don't get it. I don't get it. I've tried to get it. And this is not. I'm going to take my Georgia bias off because I am biased as a Georgia fan. But you take that off and you look at a guy who's, the amount of snaps that he played in college and the performance that correlated to those snaps, to take somebody as the 4th overall pick which is as a quarterback, you're expecting that guy to play in 2023. Like you're expecting that guy to
That's a bad
contribute.
idea. That's a
Yeah.
very bad idea. Yeah, for him.
And I think at the end of the day, I think like Anthony Richardson, I think could get developed. We saw, Josh Allen is the example that everybody uses, right? Josh Allen, 52% completion at Wyoming, came into the league in Buffalo. I think his first year, his second year, he was 52% completion.
Right.
And then he was like 54%. And then all of a sudden he like figured it out. And that's absolutely possible with Anthony Richardson. What I don't see though, is I think the difference between Anthony Richardson and Josh Allen is, and I'll say it this way because it's the only way I know to say it. It was clear when you watched Josh Allen at Wyoming that Josh Allen was a football player. Like that guy was like, he was a gunslinger. He was like,
Right.
man, I am out here to, I may not win, may not complete all these passes, but I am out here to compete and to play football. And Anthony Richardson, I don't think I've seen that from him in his time at Florida. I have not seen that mentality of like, I may not be the most accurate quarterback out here, but I'm coming after you to actually try to win this game by any means possible. And I think, you saw it in the Utah game maybe last year was probably the only time where there was these flashes of like, oh, yeah, this guy, is actually out here to compete. And I saw it. I saw it against Georgia. I saw it against, multiple teams where the guy just was pretty easy to get. It just felt like pretty easy to get rattled and get off his game. And then all bets are off. And so I think that's the difference between those two for me. And I just don't get that pick at all.
So I don't disagree with anything that you just said. I'll be straight up with that. I mean, the argument that I will make on Richardson's behalf is that if everything hits with him, which I believe is a long shot, but if everything works out, his ceiling is higher than any quarterback that we've seen in a long time, like in a really long time.
Is that just the athleticism and the arm? Is that why the ceiling is high?
I mean, the tools, like
okay,
the speed,
cool. That's
the
fair.
arm,
that's fair.
All of that,
that's fair. That's fair.
We could see him, he's not just fast. I mean, like he runs like a running back, like that run he had against LSU last year where I think he ran for 70 yards and broke 4 tackles in the open field. Like he does have some of that like special in him. Also NFL secondaries tend to tackle better than LSU's, but I think I'll put it this way. When you and I were deep in the throes of doing our Tennessee preview, and both of us were watching a lot of Tennessee film from the season and going down the wormhole of that. Like I had this moment where I went back and watched the Tennessee Florida game, and I realized that Hendon Hooker was a product of the system that he was in, and that Anthony Richardson, like you go back and watch that game and it's like, he does make some plays in that game where you're like, wow, like that was kind of a special moment. It was not consistent, but the Georgia Florida game, that throw that he made over Ringo into like very tight coverage, he made that throw, and I was, I went back and I was like, that's a throw that Hendon Hooker could never make in his life. So he does some things like that where like I get that it's tantalizing. I think though that he does, like he needs to be a guy that you're not planning on playing for 3 years, right? Like you've got to teach him the football language. And I think the other thing that scares me with him a lot, and it also scares me a lot for, well, if I was a Florida fan, it would scare me a lot for my 2023 season, is that Florida quietly had one of the best offensive lines in the SEC last year. It's not like he didn't have good pass protection. His receiving talent was not very good. And I mean, his adjusted completion percentage was 64% versus the 53% that shows up on paper. So, I mean, he did have a lot of drops and plays where his pass catchers didn't help him, but his offensive line was good. and he wasn't under duress a lot, and still, the numbers weren't great. 17 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 53% completion. That would concern me a little bit. And I think that if you're going to play him at quarterback in the NFL, then you sure as hell better make sure that those legs – Anthony Richardson. Yeah. I think you better make sure those legs are part of the game plan all the time. Don't try to turn him into, a regular quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, the team that drafted him, though, 4th overall, has Gardner Minshew, Sam Ehlinger, and an injured Nick Foles in their quarterback room. So they're expecting. I mean, maybe they're expecting Gardner Minshew and the mustache to the mustache magic this year, but they got to be expecting this guy to play. And I agree with all your points. I think he definitely has the tools. I just don't see 4th overall. I mean, I guess if you have that conviction that you're like, hey, we need a quarterback, we're willing to take a risk on this guy, then that's fine. And I do think, who else would you pick, right, at that 4th overall if you needed a quarterback with Bryce Young and CJ Stroud gone?
I would take him over Will Levis.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I would take him over Will Levis. I would take him over Will Levis and Hendon Hooker. But I do think,
but it's a gamble. It's
big time.
You're rolling the dice, and if it hits 7 or 11, then you're going to look like a genius. But there's a 80% chance or 85% chance that it's going to hit any of the other 10 numbers on those dice. So I think with Richardson, the thing that I really feel the most strongly about is what you said of playing him early is not what you want to do.
That's just the thing for me. And
he needs confidence.
Yeah.
He's not very confident. He does. You can see him sort of fall apart and unravel when a bad play happens, and throwing him out there on a bad Colts team and asking him to figure it out is a great way to kind of break him. So I hope that they don't do that, but we'll see what happens.
Awesome.
All right, so we do have some questions from the DawgsCentral subscribers forum. Jimmy Guthrie asked, could Dominic Blaylock return to the team, or is he done with football? So the best answer I can give is that I'm not entirely sure. There has been some rumors or speculation by people I know that he may just be done with football. There has also been some thought of, hey, maybe he'll come back, he's around or whatever. I don't even know what Georgia's scholarship situation right now, even if he did want to come as far as the 85, because I think that they're still over the 85 limit at this very moment in time. So long story short is I don't know anything super insightful there.
Yeah, same. I hope I would nothing more than to see Dominic Blaylock find a home where he can play meaningful snaps and have a good next step in his football career, whatever that looks like for him. But yeah, I have no idea if it's a possibility at Georgia or if he is moving on to somewhere else or hanging it up altogether. Could be any.
For sure. So this one is interesting. It says, fast forward to the 2026 NFL draft and rank the quarterback class. So we're talking about 2022 and 2023 quarterback recruits. And it's everything on this show right now in the off season seems to be, the 9 circles of Dylan Raiola, right? But yeah, I don't. Do you have any strong takes on that at this moment?
Is this recruiting or is this? I'm sorry, I missed the question. If it was recruiting or if it was draft.
said fast forward to the 2026 NFL draft and rank.
Oh, the 2026 NFL draft. All right,
so you'd be talking about guys that were freshmen in college this past season.
So
your Wegmans or your Cade Klubniks or those guys, or you'd be talking about 2023 quarterback recruits.
Yeah, so it's going to be that's a tough one. I think I need to pull up a list. I need to pull up a list here. All right, so let's see. I think Nico.
That's a good one.
I think Nico Iamaleava from Tennessee will be one of the top QBs in that class. I think Malachi Nelson will be one of the top QBs in that draft. I think Dylan. Well, would Dylan Raiola be 2026? He wouldn't be eligible.
He wouldn't be eligible yet.
So it's basically going to be 2022 and 2023. Let's just keep it to that. 2022, 2023. I think if you're looking from my perspective, I think it's going to have to be that 2022 class is just not super strong from a quarterback standpoint. No, if I'm ranking them, I'll just do my top three. I would say Nico, probably Malachi Nelson, and then it's the next one is hard because it's like, do you go? I think that kid that who was the kid that went to Washington? I think is going to be really good. Let me find his name. Austin Mack. Yeah, that kid is like 6'6". I think that kid's going to be really good. So for my money, Nico, Malachi Nelson, Austin Mack would be 1, 2, 3, and that's just pulling it right off. I think Jackson Arnold. It's going to be an absolute baller. Yeah, I'll let you go because I know you're going to put him in there. Yeah, I'll let you go because I think
no, you're good.
And I will say, let me just say, I do think sleeper real quick. After I just gave you my top three, I do think a sleeper from the 2022 class. I do think who's the kid? I brought it up and then now I can't find them. I'm sorry. I'll have to find them again. Anyway,
good.
I'll let you talk now.
You come back to it if you want.
Yeah.
All right. So mine, I'm going to go right now based off of just like what I've actually seen these dudes do with my own eyes, whether that's in spring game or what. So right now, my number one guy, Malik Murphy, Texas backup quarterback. I would give.
Okay.
I really like his game a lot. I think he's a good player, and I think him and Arch Manning is gonna be one of the most dramatic stories in college football this time next year because I think he's gonna be too good not to play, and that's going to create some interesting decisions for everybody involved. And then after him, I feel like Nico is Anthony Richardson on steroids, dude. I think that like from that toolsy kind of guy, I mean, freaking 6'7", big dude. I think he is going to be a guy that, whether he's really good or not, I think that scouts are going to salivate over him and the potential. And the NFL draft is an event based on potential, as we know. So I'm going to put him number 2. And then the third spot, I really do like Jackson Arnold based off of his high school tape. I would be torn between, I would put, as far as 3, 4, 5, it would be some mixture of Arnold, Malachi Nelson, who you already mentioned, and then the 2022 kid that I like. I'm sorry, let me. Alar, the Penn State kid.
Yeah,
he's got a big arm.
that kid's got a huge arm. It's good one.
Did you figure out who you were thinking about?
Yeah, I was thinking about Drew Alar too. Yeah, you mentioned it. Yeah, I couldn't remember the for some reason. Anyway, I'll stop talking so I don't sound stupid for our listeners.
You're good.
I couldn't remember the school he went to.
No worries. No. So this is a very open-ended question from Hunter. It says, what are 3 hot takes that you have for the upcoming season? To make this more fun, it's up to you. You can give 3 Georgia hot takes if you want, but I will say you have to give at least 1 UGA related hot take, and then your other 2 can be Georgia related if you want, or they can be about any other college football program.
Okay.
So if you want to go first, we can trade hot take for hot take here.
Yeah, so I'll give you 1 hot take. I don't think Georgia plays a game that's within 1 score all season.
Wow.
In the regular season. 12 games.
Okay.
I don't think they play a game that ends within 1 score. I think Georgia wins by double digits. Wins by 2 scores. So it could be, 9. But I think Georgia wins by 2 scores every game this year.
Okay. They win by 2 scores every game this year. I'm fine with that. I can see that happening very easily. That doesn't seem crazy to me.
Okay. All right.
I think. All right. So this time last year, I pegged Stetson Bennett as a Heisman finalist, and that was just based off the logic of Georgia's going to likely go undefeated again, and they're going to be in line for a potential back-to-back championship, and they got to send somebody to New York, right? So the question that I'm asking myself now is, who is Georgia's Heisman finalist going to be this year, right? I think that Carson Beck could have a very good year. I think that Carson Beck could, if everything goes well, talking about a guy with a lot of tools, that seems to be a theme of the show right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he is a guy that has a lot of tools, and if he puts all those tools together and puts together a nice 13 to 15 game season of tape, he could very well be a high selection, a first or second round selection in next year's NFL draft. But I'm going to say that Brock Bowers is a Heisman finalist next year, almost as just a career achievement type award, because, dude,
it's hard to do as a tight end.
It is, but people love Brock Bowers. He's a guy. He's the highest profile player on the team right now, and he's a guy that college football media has been in love with since his freshman season. So the Heisman used to be kind of like a career achievement award, like when Ron Dane won the Heisman and stuff, and I think that maybe just as kind of a, an attaboy, he'll get an invite to New York. I don't think he wins the Heisman, but I mean, Roquan Smith finished in the top 10 in Heisman voting as a linebacker. So maybe he can be like a top 5 in the Heisman voting.
Yeah, I like that. My second hot take is I'm tempted. I think I'm just going to go ahead and say it.
Let's do it.
Then we'll go ahead and say it. My second hot take is Alabama could potentially finish 3rd in the SEC West.
I'm listening.
Yeah, so I think Alabama went out and got Tyler Buckner from the portal, which tells me a couple things. And Tyler Buckner was in the portal for about 5 minutes before he committed to Alabama, which tells me a couple things. It tells me Tommy Rees has looked at that quarterback room and has said the answer is not here. I feel like that's what one thing that it says. The second thing that I think it says is that Tommy Rees is planning on running some semblance of his Notre Dame offense at Alabama, because he went out and got a guy who, was connected to him.
Right.
Connected to him and his offense. And I think that instability is really going to hurt Alabama. They're a very talented team. But I think you look at that and you look at, what's happening at LSU. I think LSU, I don't know if they've landed him or there's just rumors that they're going to get him, but I think LSU is going to get Keon Coleman at wide receiver from Michigan State. I think LSU has a lot of folks returning. So LSU kind of in the driver's seat there. And I think Alabama, when you look at the way that Texas A&M has played them the last couple of years, you look at, I think you're going to have an Ole Miss team that's going to be likely somewhat improved. I think you're going to have, some teams, Tennessee, that, if Joe Milton can play quarterback, we'll see what happens. But I think there's enough potential losses on this Alabama team that it could be their first 3-loss season under Saban since his first season, I guess. Maybe there was two. There was two. He had two 3-loss seasons, his first year, and then I think his third or fourth year.
Okay.
I could see it. Now, do those 3 losses come in the regular season, or is it 2 losses in the regular season, then they lose a bowl game or whatever? But man, I'm not buying Alabama right now. And I think Kevin Steele and Tommy Rees are two big reasons why. I think Kevin Steele is probably more stable than Tommy Rees in terms of what's happening in that quarterback room and what seems to be happening at the skill position when you watch those wide receivers in the spring game. Man, I just think if that defense isn't solid, I think Alabama is going to have some situations where they're going to have trouble outscoring a couple teams. So that's my I didn't want to go there because people were going to accuse me of being a Bama hater, but I am really objectively looking down the barrel of that team's depth and looking at the coaches that are in those seats right now. It's going to be tough, man. It's going to be tough for them. So that's my second hot take.
That's a very good hot take. I mean, just from an analysis football standpoint, like everything you're saying, I agree with, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
It does. There is still always that element of like, am I going to be the fool to count out Nick Saban? Right? Like, am I going to be that asshole that says like, oh, the dynasty's dead or whatever, and then they go and win a national championship? I would be stunned if they won a national championship this year. And not to say I haven't been stunned before. Stranger things have happened in life. I mean, shit, the government's acknowledged the existence of flying aircraft that they can't identify. So, I mean, we're in weird times here. But,
hey.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, I mean,
hey, listen, here's the hot – so double down on this. I will double down on this. All good things come to an end.
Right.
And I mean, Bama has played for the College Football National Championship 6 out of the last 8 seasons. I tweeted it earlier today. So you can't count them out. But when you look at what's happening in the SEC, you look at the parity that's been created, and then you look at these situations where it's like you're not in a place where what Texas was doing to Alabama last year when Alabama won 20-19 was nothing special. What Texas A&M was doing to Alabama when they took a goal line stand at the end of the game in Tuscaloosa, or maybe that was in Tuscaloosa last year. In Tuscaloosa, yeah, to hold on for that win. What happened with LSU, like where you're in these environments where Alabama had these games last year that there was no reason. I mean, that team last year, you had Bryce Young as your quarterback. You had good receivers. Some of those right. Receivers are the same receivers that are back this year. You had a very experienced tight end. You had an offensive line that did have its challenges, but these weren't scrubs that they were pulling off the street to play offensive line. I mean, you had, all of that, and then you were still trying to squeak out these wins. And for all, the good things that the Alabama defense did last year, you still had to have a goal line stand to beat Texas A&M. You still had to figure out some way to hold Texas, to 19 points to win that game. And you only won it 20-19. So I think, I'm not saying the dynasty is dead. I would not say that with Nick Saban. Sure. But no one will convince me that Tommy Rees and Kevin Steele were the two best coordinators that he could hire, while also convincing me that this is Nick Saban's revenge tour. You can't
that's fair.
You're going on your revenge tour with Tommy Rees and Kevin Steele. And so when I look at that, I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know. There was a time where
Tommy Rees and Kevin Steele.
Yeah, you're going on a revenge tour with Tommy Rees and Kevin Steele.
That's an all-time quote by you.
Yeah, right. I mean, if Nick Saban had gone and plundered, if he had gone and plundered Glenn Schumann and whatever.
If Dan Mullen came back to be his OC,
dude, if Dan Mullen was his offensive coordinator, I'd be like, all right, Nick Saban is serious. This guy, he's going out and getting the best available for that particular position because he wants to win. But when you go and get Tommy Rees and Kevin Steele, I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know. So again, I'll never say that the dynasty is over because they'll clip that for Twitter, and I'll never hear the end of it. But what I will say is, from a hot take perspective, man, you can't convince me that that's who you're going to war with and expect me to also say you better look out for Alabama. You just can't do it.
So life isn't fair, right? So because my hot take was going to be Bama related. You sort of stole my thunder there.
Sorry,
you did. No. Don't be sorry. You that was so eloquently and well thought out. It was very well put. You did it. You did it more than enough justice. But I'll piggyback off of it, and I will say that this is just bold and being a hot take. Yeah. This is a hot take segment. So if you clip this and put it on Twitter, then screw you. Not you, but you, the viewer watching this.
No, I'm going to be the one that puts it on Twitter. No, I'm kidding.
I think Nick Saban's going to be on the hot seat. This time next year. I think there's going to be this kind of faction within the fan base that's like, this whole thing is starting to fall apart off the rails a little bit. And then there's going to be this faction that's like, he's earned the right to go whenever he wants to, which I would probably agree with that faction. And I think that we might get a coach in waiting type situation at Alabama, or a name of, hey, I'm going to retire, after this coming season or in 2 years or whatever. It'll be interesting to see. I think that their team just I don't think their defense is going to be bad. I don't think it's going to be elite. I don't think it's going to be like a Georgia defense. But dude, if that offensive line can't run block, they're going to be in a world of trouble, because that's, I think Justice Haynes is a dude. I think he's a good running back. I think they can ride him and win some games. But the question is just is that offensive line really capable of controlling a football game? Because you look at Alabama's roster and you look at the guys they just had drafted. I think they had 7 draft picks in the first 3 rounds, if I'm not mistaken. And all those guys are, defenders or skill players, right? There's not defensive linemen being drafted. There's not offensive linemen being drafted, except for the kid that transferred from Vanderbilt before last season. And I think that is where Kirby Smart has not just passed Alabama, but lapped Alabama. Is there's 10 dudes in the offensive line room that they're comfortable playing in a football game. And there's friggin' 14 in the defensive line room that they're comfortable playing in a football game, and they will play in a football game. And Alabama doesn't have that anymore. And that dominance on the line of scrimmage is what sucks doubt out of football games and removes the fluky, chancy stuff.
Listen, not to interrupt you, but you had last
You're good.
season, just to get on this point with Nick Saban on the hot seat. You had last season, you had Nick Saban in 2 occasions. One occasion where he was talking about we used to have, these hateful, spiteful guys around here on defense that plan, going and playing on the road like meant something. And, so
Yeah.
you got him saying stuff like that he's used before to challenge his team. And then you've also had him recently in the last couple of years challenging his fans, saying, around here now, winning isn't good enough anymore. Like, it used to be, you just wanted to win the game, and winning the game was good enough. And not, his language, whether it is, challenging the fans or challenging his own team, has changed significantly in the last couple of years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think what you're seeing is like when you have to go and get a starting tackle from Vanderbilt and you're Alabama, and no offense to like Steen, and he's a good player and all that stuff, but like when those are the things that you're doing, you're going to get offensive lineman from Vanderbilt because you need depth, and the guy ends up starting. You're going and plundering from Notre Dame and guys like Kevin Steele to come in and be your coordinators. I mean, something has changed at Alabama, and whether anyone wants to admit it or not, the depth isn't what it used to be. The attitude isn't what it used to be. I do think it starts with the coaches. You have players, coming out and saying, coming out and critiquing the program on Twitter. Last year you had Alabama players saying, this isn't the Bama standard, and like you had these things being said, and I just don't think that that's a situation and scenario that you can just make up. With when you add to it the quarterback situation, you add to it, some of the skill players situation. I just think it's a very different Alabama team. I don't think that's the thing where you can just make up what you had previously. So, because there was a time when it was like, hey, all right, well, let's just turn the clock. You give us an off season, and we're coming back, and we're raring back. And you look at that, you looked at that room, and you were like, oh shoot, you looked and you were like, yeah, Alabama, didn't win the national championship in 2019, but they got Mac Jones, they got Devontae Smith, they got Mechie. It's like you had these guys coming back that you were like, all right, they're going to be legit. Now it's like, who are you supposed to be scared of? You're supposed to be scared of Tyler Buckner, Jalen Monroe, Ty Thompson, Jermaine Burton, Isaiah Bond. Like, who are like, who are the guys that you're like, oh, that dude, those are some dudes. I just don't see it, man. I see a good team for sure. I mean, Alabama's always going to be one of the top talent teams when you look, in terms of talent composite, top 10 and all those things. And
right.
But man, I just don't see it. I don't see the attitude. So that's it for me.
Fair enough.
All right. My third hot take. Yeah, my final hot take is I think USC misses the college football playoff. I don't know if this is much of a hot take because it's Lincoln Riley and it's only his second year. But I think USC misses the college football playoff again, and I think USC, even with Caleb Williams, I think USC takes a step back this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I think the Pac-12 is going to be good, so I don't dislike that. And they caught a break last year by dodging Oregon in the regular season. So, cool. Yeah, I like it. I am going to say my third hot take is that Georgia faces either Texas or USC in the first round of the college football playoff, and that because Kirby Smart dislikes the guys in charge of those two programs, that they friggin' leave a giant was. Like they were that team. I mean, I don't put up 65 in a playoff game. It'll feel like that level of dominance. It's gonna just be friggin' ass working.
If Georgia plays Texas in the college football playoff, I fear for some young lads from that 2018 Sugar Bowl situation where
Correct.
Georgia had guys who were tweeting on social media and making fun, basically making fun of Oklahoma because they felt like they should be in the playoff and then went out there and got beat by Texas. Man, I think that will be a bloodletting if that ends up being the case.
Totally. Yeah. I'm with you.
Yeah.
All right. Couple other questions before we wrap up here. Got one. So any kick/2023. Any surprises back there?
I don't know if there'll be any surprises. I think
Muse,
Dominic Lovett's going to get some. Yeah, Muse would be the surprise. But how do you see him?
He's got to be back there after.
Surely this won't be a Jonathan Rump situation, will it? How do you see him making plays like that? And Kirby talking about how he's embarrassed people on the scout team and all those things, and not put him back there to return. I will say the one caveat, I will say punt return. I think Ladd McConkey has that thing locked down. I think Ladd, like he has enough game experience doing it, that I think you're going to see him, and then I think you're going to see guys like, I think Dylan Bell was returning some kick returns last year, but Muse is obviously the hot trendy pick. I would say Dominic Lovett would be a guy that I would see out there, probably punt return a little bit too.
Yeah, I think
he did at Missouri. Yeah,
for sure. I think McConkey with like just his knees and stuff. Like I think maybe he gets a year off from punt returning. Like he was back there a lot last year. But Kyrus is gone too, and he was a big part of the return game over the last few years. So it is a fair question of who you might see back there. I wouldn't be shocked to see one of these young defensive backs either, like maybe an Everett or somebody like that. I'm trying to think.
I wish. It's never going to happen. But I wish. Malachi Starks ran kicks back when he was in high school.
That would be sweet.
And
that would be.
Man, I would love that guy.
Sweet.
Was a two-way player in high school. Just an incredible athlete with the ball in his hands.
Right.
Would have definitely loved to see that if that would be a possibility.
Have a little Charles Woodson type vibe where
he could do it,
if he pull down like 9 interceptions. Have like a few special teams touchdowns on the year, maybe get some conversation for some big awards. The other ones I'll throw in Yazid Haynes or Anthony Evans. Both those dudes can absolutely fly. 2 true freshman wide receivers. You're talking like maybe 4.2 on a really good day, high 4.2s for one of those guys. Definitely 4.3 type guys. Wouldn't be surprised at all to see one or both of them take some kick and punt returns this year. And last question from June Recruiting Fearmonger, the best name on the DawgsCentral forum. Curious how you view Georgia's defensive line post G-Day / Bear Alexander transfer. He says Kristen Miller and Jordan Hall looked really good, but both are so inexperienced.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that Bear is that experienced, right? Right. I think people look at it and you say, I'll say this. I think Bear Alexander is a super talented guy. I think Georgia, obviously you want to keep as many of those guys as you can for depth. And you want guys that want to be there, and you want guys that are good culture fits and all those things. What I will say about Bear Alexander, though, that I'll say about, Jordan Hall and some of those other guys, it's like Bear Alexander came in, he played as a true freshman, right? I mean, so when you look at, a guy like Jordan Hall, there's no reason why he couldn't play as a true freshman if Georgia needs him to play as a true freshman and if he's ready to go.
Sure.
And so I think Georgia, I think we've learned, right, is that Georgia is going to play the best guys available and the guys who are ready. And, I think even if you look at Bear Alexander last year, I mean, he played 169 snaps, which was less than Tyranny Dawkins, Warren Brinson, Tramel Walther, Zion Logue, Nazir Stackhouse. Like, you got a lot of guys that are coming back that played a lot more snaps than Bear Alexander. So I think Georgia's defensive line is going to be fine. I think where it potentially may hurt them and where a guy like Kristen Miller is going to have to really step up is Bear Alexander was probably the most athletic of the guys on that line. When you just think about just pure athleticism, like he definitely is an athlete. But I think Kristen Miller is too, and I think Jordan Hall has that potential as well. And so on third down, you're going to have a guy Georgia has thrived with super athletic defensive linemen on third down, on those interior defensive linemen on third down. Jalen Carter, Bear Alexander, Devontae Wyatt, like those guys who just
pass rushing technique.
Just that pass. Exactly. Yeah. So I think you do, I don't think Nazir Stackhouse, Warren Brinson, even Zion Logue, like I don't think those guys are that kind of player. So you got to find that player. I think it might be Kristen Miller. I think it might be Tyron Ingram Dawkins, even though they play him outside sometimes a little bit. But I think you got to find that player. But I don't personally. The one position that I will never worry about until I am proven otherwise is defensive line. Georgia has enough depth. They rotate enough guys. It's like until somebody shows me otherwise, I'll never be concerned about that position.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah. Trey Scott, just dude's getting paid over $1 million now. If that tells you,
dude deserves it.
If that
absolutely deserves every cent of that.
Yeah, if that tells you the state of the defensive line in Georgia, that's a good bellwether.
Yeah, I think for me, the thing I would say about Bear, like he is an athletic guy, but he also Georgia's got a lot of dudes like Bear already. Honestly, like Warren Brinson is Bear Alexander a couple years older. Like they're very similar players. Bear might be a tad bit more explosive, but like what I mean by those types of guys is it's what we were talking about a second ago. Like they've got a lot of 300-ish pound, 3 technique defensive tackles who are athletic and can rush the passer on third down. And Bear like may have been, I would have ranked Brinson or him as probably the best pass rushing defensive tackle. But if Georgia wants to get to the quarterback, they will get to the quarterback. There's a lot of ways that Georgia gets to the quarterback. And the thing with Bear is like his run defense and his gap filling and run defense was not at a spot yet where he was ready to be a 3-down defensive lineman at the University of Georgia, not with how they require those guys to play.
I mean, it took, let's be honest, right? It took Jalen Carter until his third year at Georgia to be considered a 3-down defensive lineman. Then he got injured and that kind of messed it up a little bit. But like even Jalen Carter, it just, you have to be that dude if you're going to play 3 downs at the University of Georgia.
Absolutely. And I think the guy that I think is that dude this year that no one knows is that dude yet is Tyron Ingram Dawkins. I think he is like, he's always had a little something different than what most guys in that room have, what most defensive linemen have. Like when he is on and really focused and in good shape, like he can make havoc happen from a lot of different spots on the defensive line. And the other beauty about Georgia is that if they want to in third down packages, and I'm sure they will in certain third down packages, they can slide Mykel Williams inside because at 260, 270, he's big enough to go inside, and they can put all the litany of pass rushing talent they have on the edges into the game, and they can go a little bit lighter in the middle on, 3rd and 8. And then, you've got an offensive guard or center that has to deal with the quickness of Mykel Williams, but he's still big enough to sit there and not be a liability and run. So there's plenty of options. And I think you said it well. I would not worry about Georgia's defensive line or defensive line depth until someone gives me a reason to do it.
I like it.
So that is all we have for today. Closing thought. This will be kind of like our the moment of zen for the DawgsCentral show. There's a tweet that got posted not long before we went on the air by On3 Sports by their main account, and it says at JD Pickle, who I guess is one of their video guys.
He's a host of their college football show. JD Pickle is the On3 version of Josh Pate. That's all you need to know.
Gotcha. Okay. He is he's on 3 Pate State. So he has this quote to say on the Alabama quarterback dilemma. It says, "What I was told about this situation as a whole with bringing in Tyler Buchner was that Alabama is looking for their Stetson Bennett." And I read this before I walked over to come onto the air with you, and oh man, there are 17 layers to that tweet right there, and all of them are either deeply satisfying or just 100% hilarious if you're a Georgia fan or a Georgia person. Like, dude,
someone
that, was old,
what
and 2-star and a bum. Now they're trying to find one of those.
What I heard, Graham, is that Tommy Rees looked at the recruiting board and the depth chart board on his way out of Notre Dame, and is just trying to bring that to Alabama. I heard that Alabama is now trying to copy Georgia. First, they did it with the stadium lights with the LED. Now they're trying to copy Georgia with the approach to the QB room. So just a lot of layers. But I mean, you tweeted it. I think there are a lot of Alabama fans that are deleting a lot of tweets in hopes that Tyler Buchner becomes any semblance of what Stetson Bennett was. A lot of tweets are getting deleted after this development.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I remember a time when Georgia hired Scott Cochran and a guy, Eric Evans, who is a really good writer for Alabama's SB Nation site. But he made this big headline about Big Lots Bama, making a coaching move in reference to Georgia. And we've come full circle to where, Georgia's gone from being Big Lots Bama, and now Alabama is Dollar General Georgia. So it's quite a thing to witness. The circle of life comes for us all. Absolutely. 100%. And here we are just, basically witnessing empires fall and rise in real time. Just totally riveting, and very glad to be here on the ride with you and all of our wonderful DawgsCentral subscribers for this time in history.
What a great time. What a time to be alive.
What a time to be alive. On that, we will see you guys later on this week.
See ya.